Hi everyone. This short video is really going to start talking about how you write a works cited page, which can be one of the trickiest and most confusing parts about citing something appropriately in your work. But hopefully this little video is going to help make it a bit easier for you. So let's get started. When we think about MLA citation, we always have to understand that to have a complete citation, it has two parts. There's the in-text citation, or the actual part of the citation that's within your writing, in the paragraphs part of your essay. And then there's the bibliographic citation, which comes at the end of your paper. Now, your in-text citation has a couple of key features that you need. You always need to be using a signal phrase to indicate that, hey, watch out, what's coming up next is somebody else's ideas or words. Oftentimes you're going to use a parenthetical citation. Those are the little parentheses at the end of a sentence that has the author's last name and a page number in it. But however you do your in-text citation, it needs two parts. It has to include the author's name, and depending upon what it is that you're taking your source from, a page number. And the key to this really is that you only put enough in your in-text citation to direct your reader back to the bibliographic citation, back to your works cited page. And that's really where all of the information about the source is going to be located. So your bibliographic citation for MLA format is called works cited, not work singular, but works plural, cited. And this is only a list of the works and sources that you actually refer to in your essay. So you probably will read many more sources than you actually use. The only ones that are going to find their way into your works cited page are the ones that show in your in-text citations. And finally, the thing that you want to keep in mind is the MLA formatting guide was updated in 2010. And this update means that we don't use any URLs. So if I see a works cited page that has a lot of the HTTP colon backslash backslash blah blah blah, I know that you're either not following instructions or you're using an older version of MLA formatting that's incorrect. Okay, so when we think about the works cited page, which is what this particular video is going to talk about, there are certain things that you have to pay attention to while you're doing research. And being really careful to make a list of these as you're doing your research can save you a lot of time in the long run. In fact, on our class Blackboard site, you'll find a handout that has basically this information that you could fill out for each source if it would be helpful. So here's what you need to pay attention to. Who wrote the source? You need the author's complete name. And if there's more than one author, you need all of the names. What is the source called? So you need the title of the article or of the book and the complete title. You need to know who published it. So if we're talking about a book, you need to know the publisher's information. Or if we're talking about an article, you need the title of the periodical, which is the title of the magazine or the newspaper. Then you also need to think about when was it published. For a book, you just need the year, but for a periodical, you may need a date of publication or a volume and an issue number. Now, if you're dealing with just print sources, you can stop there. But most of the sources you find in your research for college courses are going to be through a database or going to be through online sources. So then you also need to talk about where did you find it. Remember what I said, there's no URLs for MLA format. So it's really important that you pay attention to the database you're using because you're going to include that in your works cited page. And then finally, when did you find it? It's really, really, really important that for internet sources, you keep careful notes about the date you accessed the material. Because the thing about internet sources is they can change from moment to moment. So when you put the date down, it kind of locks that in place. So how do you find this information? Well, depending upon the database you're using, it's going to be located in different areas. I'm going to go with ProQuest here and kind of give you an overview of how to find it in ProQuest. So the first thing that you're going to notice is that right at the top of the source, you have a bit of formatted bibliographic information. In this case, Jost, Ted, LaCroix, Christophe, Brager, Christine, those are your authors. Current Microbiology is the title of the journal. 68.4, that's your volume, point, issue number. April 2014, that's your date. And then you have your page range. Now, the thing that you want to pay attention to is there is not a single database that properly formats its own sources in MLA format. So even if it is the MLA database, if you're looking at, the database has its own way of formatting. Sometimes it's hard to tell, for instance, what all these little dots are if you're not familiar with it. So rather than taking your information from where this little arrow is, which is on the front page, it's really better to go to the citation and abstract page because that's going to give you a much more complete description of what it is you're looking at. So if you click on citation and abstract, and this is for ProQuest, but all databases have some way of expanding the citation or the abstract information. But if you go ahead and click on citation and abstract, it's going to take you to a complete citation page. Now, this is really important that you're paying attention to your Rules for Writers handbook because your citation page is going to have more information than you need. For instance, this particular citation page has everything from publication year to the publisher to the place of publication. It has an ISSN number. It has a document ID number. None of this is stuff that MLA asks for. The things that you need to pay attention to on the abstract page are the things that we talked about before. So, what is the title? Where is it published and when is it published? And if you take a look at the abstract page, what you're going to notice is it breaks down the volume number and the issue number so that you can tell which number is which. Oftentimes, you're not going to be sure what kind of a source you're looking at. Nobody expects you to memorize all of the different types of sources and all the different titles. When you go to the abstract page, it will always tell you what type of source it is. So in this case, it's a scholarly journal. That way you can open up your Rules for Writers books to scholarly journals and follow the instructions. And it'll also remind you what database it is. I really recommend that you print this page or save a copy of this page. There's nothing worse than sitting down to write your essay and then realizing you're missing something that you need for your Works Cited page. There you are, almost done with what you need to do, and you have to go back to the beginning. So print out the abstract page, keep it, because it'll save you time in the long run. Okay, so what do we do with all of that information? Well, I can't stress this enough, but you have to follow instructions, and the instructions are in your Rules for Writers handbook. There's really no secret or no magic to doing a Works Cited page. It's a matter of looking at the instructions and replicating what you see in your paper. But let's go over some helpful hints. First of all, author information is always last name first and first name second. If there's multiple authors, you need to keep the authors in the order that they're listed on the publication title. So you're not going to change that order. However the byline reads for the text you're using, keep it in that way. But in your whole Works Cited page, you want to alphabetize by the author's last name. Now your source title. Oftentimes databases are going to print source titles in a lot of different ways. MLA asks that you capitalize the words. So even if the title looks like only the first letter is capitalized, when you type up that title, all of the words should have a capital letter in them. Remember, articles are in quotes, books and periodicals are italicized, and they should be just like I've shown you here. Now, you're often going to have titles published within other sources. You want to kind of think of this as going from the smallest to the largest. So the source title is going to be first, and then you're going to go to the periodical or to the book, right? So that you're getting the smaller source to the bigger source. So here's an example. Your name, title of article, title of periodical. After you have your author's name and the title information, you always have publication information. And this is where you need to pay attention to your source type. Books and periodicals are different. For a book, you need the publisher's city and state, but that information does not go into a magazine citation. So for a book, you need a publisher's city and state, the publisher's name, and the year published. And again, all of this is in your Rules for Writer's Handbook. It's a matter of taking out your handbook, opening to the page, and following instructions. For periodicals, it depends upon the type of periodical you're citing. Newspapers are different than magazines, are different than academic journals. So you need to make sure that you know what kind of source you're citing before you cite. For journals, you're always going to need a volume and an issue number. For magazines, you're going to need the date. For newspapers, you're going to need the date. So you can see here an example of how this works for a journal article. Now, the thing that happened in 2010 when MLA changed is that they said, let's get rid of all of these URLs that are kind of cluttering up the page, and let's just make it really specific about whether this is a print source or a web source. So if you're using print sources, after the date and the page range, you need the word print. If you're using web sources, you're going to need to use the word web. And then, and this is really important, you actually have to give us the date that you accessed it. Remember, because the internet can change. So you need to be sure that you tell us which date you got the information. The other thing that you need for web sources, and most of your sources are going to be coming from a database, is you're going to need the information about what the database is. And remember, no website information is needed. So let's look at a couple sample entries. This is a journal, a newspaper, and a magazine. And as you can see, they all follow the same pattern. Author's name, title of article, title of periodical. After that, though, things get a little bit different. For a journal, you need the volume and the issue number, and you notate those with a period between them. You never write out volume 1, issue 1. It's just 2.3. For a magazine and a journal, you actually have to use the date. And you're always going to notate the date using the European style. So day first, abbreviated month, and then the year. And the way that you notate it gives your reader who's familiar with MLA an instant understanding of whether they're looking at an academic journal or a magazine. So pay attention to those differences between journals and the newspaper and magazine articles. So when in doubt, and I know this is going to be confusing at first, it always is, but when in doubt, really go to your handbook, open it up, and use it as a tool. If you ever have any questions, you can always ask them in class or on the message boards, or you can stop into office hours, and I'm happy to walk you through this. There's really no secret to doing a good works cited page. It's all about taking your time, making sure that you have time, and going step by step following the instructions. Hope that helps.